I welcome you warmly to the University of Nairobi and to the College of Biological and Physical Sciences, known as Chiromo Campus. I highly appreciate the Memorandum of Understanding my institute has with Pan-Africa Climate Justice Alliance. And we are doing this together through that Memorandum of Understanding, hoping that we can advance the knowledge of climate change in the continent and in the country specifically.
People are living with the impacts of climate change on a daily basis, and none more so than our women farmers. As we all know women farmers across the world, and we all know that they are dealing with the effects on a daily basis. So before I introduce our women farmer from Uganda to speak, I would also like to acknowledge, just to take a moment to acknowledge the presence of our British MPs who are attending this meeting. Dr. Lisa Cameron MP, Steve Double MP, and Craig Williams MP. You're very welcome here, and I hope that you find the discussion stimulating. Without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Loquia Vicky Akelo.
I would like to send to you a clear message. When I said climate change, you answer food. When I said woman, you said food. Why? Because women are on front line of fighting climate change. Climate change, woman. So thank you. My name is Vicky Akelo Loquia. I'm a rural farmer from Gulu, northern Uganda. A very rural farmer at a grassroots, not in the town. So thank you. Maybe I will be given time and tell you more the impact of climate change on a rural farmer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vicky. I think it's worth giving Vicky another round of applause. She's come from Uganda. And I would just like to say I pay tribute to you, Mama, for your leadership and for your willingness to stand up and fight for your people and for women farmers across Africa. I think it's a very inspiring start to this session, so thank you very much. This session that we're going to do now, what we are going to do, we're going to go to Mithika first of all, just for a brief outline to place things in context. Then I am going to ask for feedback on each of the three summits, a brief 5-minute summary, not necessarily reading the declaration, but just giving a brief summary of the declaration. And then we will move to a discussion within the panel to react to those declarations from the summits, and then following that we will have a question and answer.
We have added in that chorus where we are saying, yes, we in Kenya, we in Africa, we from rural areas, we from women's sector, we from youth, we from smallholder farmers, we want a good deal. We want a just deal in Paris. And why do we need that? Most of you could be attending some of these meetings for the first time. But what makes us meet here is a problem which is at your doorstep. It is an abstract problem. It may seem abstract, but it has a big impact on our livelihoods. Whether you are a farmer, whether you are a beekeeper, whether you are a pastoralist, a woman, a faith leader, a youth, a child, anybody, we are being affected alive The only problem is that we are not able to put this in our context. And that is the purpose of a series of awareness meetings which we have been really driving up. The issue of climate change is an important issue in the global development, political, economic, diplomatic, socio-cultural interactions. But here, it is quite a far distant issue. Yet, it is with us.
At the end of the day, the issue is the people who have contributed least to this problem are the people who are suffering most, and that's the point. And the people who have caused the problem are still not doing enough to fix the problem. And again, that's the real point. We need action from those people as well. And as you heard at the end there, Mithika thankfully represented some of the outcomes of the parliamentarian summit. I think that was a brief summary. I'm sure that the final declaration will be circulated with other papers from these events. But you can see the emphasis there on climate justice, the emphasis there on equity, on ecological security. Those are really strong agendas, and if the African negotiators can go forward with that strong stance, we hope that African voices will be heard very strongly in COP21. So can I call on Reverend Professor Dr. Aden G. Msafiri, who is Climate Change Ambassador for Tanzania. He has volunteered to take up the task of feeding back on a declaration from the Interfaith Leaders Summit, which was a very exciting event and has been held over the last 2 days.
I've been given the task to present the resolutions of FBOs at the ACC. So if I say climate, you say justice. And then when I say justice, you say for climate, and then you look at your neighbor and you say 3 times, wow, wow, wow. So I repeat, climate, justice. Justice for climate. And then, wow, wow, wow. So we do it in a perfect way. Climate, justice for climate. Wow, wow, wow. Okay, there is therefore a great need for global agreements, not global pledges and global blah, 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 blah. Therefore, 1, reduce the level of greenhouse gases emissions so as to reduce the increase in global temperatures to be below 2 degrees Celsius. 2nd, develop a fund that will enable countries to mitigate effectively and efficiently the effects, the direct and the indirect effects of climate change. Faith leaders, my dear brothers and sisters, also must be fully engaged in this process, since they are part and parcel of the society, since they have the solutions. Climate change is par excellence an ethical problem, and ethical problems need ethical solutions, not scientific propaganda. This engagement should include strong advocacy to the COP21. And we as faith leaders want to be this conference of peoples. Conference of peoples, not conference of polluters. COP means conference of polluters. So, especially by seeking to inject a moral component, an ethical trajectory to the discussions, and eventually agreements thereafter. This is important since the governments are held hostage by big corporates who want profit at all costs, while the civil society is being silenced gradually by the same entities, leaving faith leaders as only credible defender of the people.
Foreign words that he was bringing forwards. I think what I especially liked is on the one hand a challenge to the leaders, a challenge to get this tackled, and then on the other hand some very practical suggestions. I love this idea of a tree planting at every occasion, be it consecration, be it confirmation, be it whichever it births, marriages. You have a plant a tree on that occasion. I think that's a very fantastic suggestion and a practical suggestion from the faith leaders as well. So thank you very much, Reverend. So, the next summit that we would like to hear feedback from is the People's Summit. The African People's Summit on Climate Change that was held over the last 2 days in this city. And I will call on Deborah Ikorut Oriyama from the We Have Faith organization.
I'll give the remarks from the People's Summit, and that was convened on the 12th with under the theme of Towards a Common African Position on Climate Change in the new Universal Climate Change Agreement, looking at COP21 as the main agenda. And some of the highlights that came out of this conference is the need for emphasis and more effort on adaptation for Africa. And we looked at women and different groups. So I will briefly just go through what we had as our outcome. One, all actions to address climate change and processes established under the agreement must ensure a gender-responsive approach, looking at women and issues of women, taking into account environmental integrity, looking at moral issues on the environment, intergenerational equity, looking at young people and future generations, and respect for human rights, looking at climate refugees, among other issues coming out of climate change, as well as the right to develop, looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, and the rights of indigenous people. Specifically, we as the People's Summit want to see the following. With regards to the Global Climate Agreement that we are looking forward to, is that the agreement should be fair, ambitious, and legally binding, and looking at climate actions at a level adequate to stop climate change and keep global warming at a level well below 1.5 degrees Celsius. Number two, on adaptation, we realize that, and we still reiterate that adaptation is a key issue within the African continent. And so one of the main agenda should be closing the adaptation gap and closing it in relation to financing from the developed to the developing countries. And we need the developing countries to look into the finances that we are putting into adaptation for the most vulnerable. As we said earlier, I think the issue of fairness and equity is quite something that we would want to see going forward. On issues of public finance, realizing that financing is needed for us to be able to do each and everything that we are calling for, including what Reverend has spoken about here. We're looking at delivering and scaling up the public finance to enable the poorest to be able to adapt and to transition to low carbon pathways. Two, looking at our national governments, because it is not them against us or us against them. It is a question of how can we all work together to make this issue, to look at this issue positively and find a solution to it. National governments must also commit new resources from national budgets to address adaptation for increased food security. Three, we need to increase the capacity of our national governments in developing countries to track climate financing from the international community and private sector as well. We need to provide clear mandates to the financial and technological institutions established by the UNFCCC to support initiatives that close the gap of adaptation, as I mentioned in the earlier point. On addressing issues of gender and youth, we see gender and youth as a key part of tackling climate change and putting African countries on their path to sustainable development. Women play an essential role in caring for the environment and must be empowered to protect their livelihoods, communities, and nature. We applaud the existing COP decisions to promote gender balance, gender equality, and gender responsive climate policy. However, we think that there is more that can be done.
Well done for representing the people so ably. I think what was interesting there is we also had some hints, like in effect a response to some of the interfaith leaders' calls. Africans must not act as victims, must act as proponents of their own change. And I think what was really powerful there was a call both for the international negotiators and the international community to act, but also for national governments to take strong action in their countries, which I think moves us on very well to the outcomes of the second Pan-Africa Parliamentarian Summit. So this was the second time African parliamentarians have met in Nairobi from across Africa to discuss and consider climate change. The first time, I understand, was before Copenhagen. So this is a very opportune moment to hear back on a declaration of the second Pan-Africa Parliamentarian Summit that happened between the 10th and the 13th of November in Nairobi. Now, as Nithika said earlier, the parliamentarians are actually on their way back home. So we have asked Sam Ogola, who's the program manager of PACCHA, to ably represent the outcomes of the Parliamentarians Summit.
As you may have heard from Nithika, this is the second Parliamentarian Summit happening in Nairobi. And we had 52 parliamentarians from across Africa who were in Nairobi from 10th to 13th of this month, deliberating on issues of our common interest across Africa and what they also want to do back home in their various countries across the continent. We're also privileged to have the President of the Republic of Kenya, His Excellency Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, declaring the event open on the 11th. Prior to that, we had the breakfast session for the parliamentarians on the 10th of this month at Pan-Africa. What I will do basically here is to read out to you the declaration by the African Parliamentarian Summit on Climate Policy, which was held in Nairobi. We, members of the Parliament of Kenya, the Pan-African Parliament, East African Legislative Assembly, ECOWAS Parliament, Inter-Parliamentarian Committee of West African Monetary and Economic Union, Pan-African Parliamentarians Network on Climate Change, having met in Nairobi, Kenya, for the second African Parliamentarian Summit from 10th to 13th of November 2015, under the theme Towards a Common Position on Climate Justice and Equity in the new Universal Climate Agreement in Paris. Aware that the climate change represents a real threat to economic development and long-term prosperity, manifesting in adverse and catastrophic impact on all the people, and especially the poorest and the most vulnerable people on the continent of Africa. Recognizing the negative impact that climate change has on the national poverty eradication and sustainable development strategies in African countries, recalling the objective of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and particularly Article 2, which provides that stabilization of greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere at the level that will prevent dangerous atmospheric interference with the climate system, within a time frame sufficient to allow ecosystems to adapt naturally to climate change and to ensure that food production is not threatened and to enable economic development to proceed in a sustainable manner. Further recalling the pertinent provisions of the UNFCCC Convention, and particularly Article 3.1, which provides that the parties should protect the climate system for the benefit of the present and the future generation of mankind on the basis of equity and in accordance with their common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capacities. Accordingly, the developed country parties should take the lead in combating climate change and the adverse effects thereof. Reaffirming the urgency of reducing global greenhouse gas emission and limiting the increase in average world temperature to less than 1.5 degrees centigrade, relative to the pre-industrial level, in line with the fundamental objective of the UNFCCC, and as agreed by the government in the Copenhagen Agreement of 18th December 2009. Concerned that Africa makes insignificant contribution to global warming, yet the continent bears the brunt of the negative impact. Recalling the Sustainable Development Goals adopted in New York on the 25th of September this year, and particularly goal number 13 on combating climate change and its negative impacts, and which affirmed the UNFCCC as primary UN institution to coordinate climate action. Mindful of the African Union Assembly of Heads of States and Government Decision number 16 of 2015 on Africa's engagement in the global climate change negotiations. Taking note of the key messages adopted by CAHOSOC, the Committee of African Heads of States on Climate Change, at the meeting held on the sideline of the 2015 UN General Assembly in New York. Further taking note of the African Ministerial Conference on Environment Decision number 15/9 on climate change, and acknowledging the strong leadership provided by the Committee of African Heads of States and Government of Climate Change.
There was a strong component across the representation on development and how do we link development agenda across the board linked to the climate change. And to me, I think if I have to put it in one sentence, I think what we are saying is Africa deserves to thrive rather than survive climate change. What we are seeing now is efforts to make Africa survive climate change. We know there is a massive adaptation gap, but the message that we should send out is despite climate change, Africa has a right to thrive and we need to make it happen. And last, I think what we have seen across the board was the commitment by all of us. We have seen commitment, for example, by Member of Parliament committing to undertake the legislative initiative on climate change and to be drivers in their own parliament to make sure every country has a progressive climate change law. We have seen commitment from faith leaders to speak about climate change in everything that they do. And I was just imagining, for example, in a wedding ceremony, and there is that part that the priest say, I now pronounce you husband and wife. And usually they say kiss the bride, right? So we can now say, I now pronounce you husband and wife, you must plant a tree. That will look so awesome. So I think generally, that is it. And bottom line, I think as Reverend said, we have to keep the main thing. And I think to me, the bottom line thing that we all agree that business as usual has to stop. We cannot afford the cost of inaction. Something needs to happen, and it needs to happen now. Thank you.
Now, Professor, we'd love to hear, because your experience over so many years of working on this very issue, trying to raise the profile, how do you feel about the declarations that have come out? Do you think they're headed in the right direction? Is there something that's missing? Is there something that needs to be emphasized?
Thank you, Mr. Rapporteur. Ladies and gentlemen, these are very powerful messages that have been passed by the three voices, the people's voice, the parliamentarian, and the religious community. The voices are aimed at COP21, but the voices should not end with COP21. The voices must continue. Let me remind us that Africa has the longest recorded history of El Niño, La Niña. If you recall the dream of Pharaoh in Egypt and the translation of that dream of 730 years and 7 lean years as a record of El Niño, La Niña in the continent. That history has been elusive to us because we have lived with El Niño, La Niña for a long time and we have never appreciated it. Before we could migrate to other parts, now we cannot migrate to other parts. I think what we are calling here and what the voices are saying is these are Africa's needs. It is not their desire, it is not their want. We may not get everything, but it is a journey that we've started together, and we must continue that journey until we achieve all that we have articulated.
On the far end of the panel, we have Ms. Mathis, who, as I said, is Deputy Permanent Representative to the UN in Nairobi for the French government, and is also going to engage with us on behalf of the COP21 team, I understand.
Thank you. I have to tell you that first of all, we are privileged. I'm here as a French woman, together with a French woman of the French embassy, so the gender principle is on the way. I wanted to share some elements for your, not information, but in order for you here in Nairobi and in Africa to have some view on how the incoming French presidency is observing you or is listening to you, and what is in preparation and what we are expecting from you at COP21. The first thing, you have to be sure that for the incoming French presidency, Africa is a key partner. You have to know why. It's not me. No. I try to be objective. The first thing is that your group of 54 countries represent the force of the parties to the climate convention. You can be heard. The second thing is that you represent the third of the group G77 and China. You can be avoided. You are also in every negotiating group. You are dealing, you are involved in the small island states group, in the least developing country group, the rainforest group, the Arab group. So in any place of the negotiator, you are there. And it's not only at the COP21, it has been the case for a long period of time. The new thing is that now you are heard, you are prepared, and I heard from you these 3 days that you want to speak with a unified voice. So for the French presidency, I can tell you that Africa is key.
We would like to engage with the audience. We would like to take 3 questions at a time. And please, when you are asking a question, please, if you can introduce yourself just briefly. And then also, if your question is targeted at a particular member of the panel, please say so. I'm not going to ask everybody to respond to every question, because otherwise we will be here until the march is finished tomorrow. So if you don't request a particular person to answer the question, I will pick on somebody and hope that they are willing to answer. So questions, please.
I just came today. Hi Sam, my brothers. My name is Abdurrahman. I'm the Deputy Director of the Horn of Africa Regional Environmental Center and Network. We are a member of the continental organization PACJA. And while you guys were meeting here and having all this mobilization, we're having another meeting also where more than 150 representatives of 9 countries, Djibouti, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Kenya, South Sudan, Sudan, Eritrea, I think I'm forgetting some of them. They met, and we met actually in Hargeisa, Somaliland, to also mobilize for COP21, and in continuation with what we organized with PACJA last April, the road to Paris in Addis. And we had the co-chair, John Bideri, as well as other members from PACJA, like Dr. Shadad Muawiyah, just to say that actually while you guys were mobilizing here from south to Kenya, we're trying to bring together all the Eastern African countries also to mobilize. So yes, Africa is united. And
listening very attentively until when I got some mixed feelings somewhere. Well, I have 2 major concerns. One of them is that climate change is an opportunity for development. It created a very big mystery to me when we women are struggling amidst a lot of challenges, it's increased a lot of poverty, disease, and anything you can think about. I needed more light on how climate change is an opportunity to us to evolve. Another concern is, yes, we have our negotiators. Why are our presidents called to come first? We wanted our negotiators to come first. They come with our issues, and then the presidents come later to sign. So to me, I've got mixed feelings. Could it be a deal, or could it be something is somewhere going wrong?
They say the only one who is pinched, that person who is pinched is the only person that can feel the pain. We are losing our natural resources. We are losing our families. People are dying of unknown sickness and illnesses. How do you expect us to sit down, relax, talk positively about the effects of the problems affecting us? There are some people who don't really adhere to these, let me say, dialogues. There are some, they are dictators themselves, and when you dictate upon them, then they feel okay. If I cry out, then definitely that is to me, my cry is not heard. But if you hear my plea, there is no need for me to cry out. Thank you.
Okay, so I will try to make that clear. In Copenhagen, 2009, the head of state arrived as usual at the end of the negotiation. And it was requested from them to make a miracle. And they are not reverends, they are head of state. So they couldn't succeed. The point is that if you have, it's the most complex negotiation. I have to tell you, with the biggest amount of parties, which the amount is bigger than the number of states at the UN. You have 193 states and you have 196 parties. So you see that there is something which is incredible for that negotiation on climate change. And at the moment, in 2 weeks, what the French presidency thought, if we ask in their authority, in their responsiveness, to come and open and to say in front of the world, I commit myself on behalf of Kenya, on behalf of Uganda, on behalf of France, to ask and to request my team, my negotiating team, to do its best in order to achieve something after that during the 2 weeks. It's the way that we are expecting, organizing what we have in mind would be a call of head of states. So it's the new thing. And after that, there are time for the negotiator not to sleep a lot, to meet, to discuss, and to find a solution, because the solution is not from a group of countries against other countries. We need to find a global solution for the planet and for us. So for that, in order not to think that, okay, we have, it's the beginning, the first week, it's only negotiators. After that, it's the minister coming the second week. And at the end, we would have the head of state to make a miracle. No, it's the contrary. They come, they say something, they stand, they make a very moral involvement of the state. And after that, they leave those whose job is to negotiate, to try, and it's the reason why I told you, from Africa, as the presidency, we need you. It's not France or the presidency which will make the deal. We try to help, and I came here to tell you what we are expecting from you as the 54 countries as a unified voice, is to try to push towards an achievement. But an achievement with all, not only Africa, talking to Africa. Is it clear?
Can I just abuse my position as chair as well, because I just want to reflect to you that this is something that's being raised. It was raised in the Parliamentarian Summit. It's been raised in many side conversations I've heard. So I do also wonder whether it might be worth feeding back, that it's worth being, I don't know if there's a way of making it clear to people before they come that the heads of state are arriving to start with in order to do that. Because at the moment it seems, to a lot of experienced COP watchers, it looks like a bit strange and a bit suspicious, as opposed to a positive move. So I think it's worth feeding that back to Paris. Yeah. Reverend, I just wanted you to reflect on what the lady said here about there's a lot of calls for people not to act as victims and to come out with very positive agendas. But how do you do that when you're faced with the realities of day-to-day life dealing with climate change? I think this was the point you made. So I wonder if you can offer some words of advice on that.
Well, I mean, first of all, of course, I don't sit where you sit. But I think that, my point was to say, look, the situation that you're facing is a serious situation. And I don't think that you should be apologetic about that at all. I think you should make your voices heard. And I think you should take advantage of every single opportunity that is at your disposal to do that. I don't think you should wait until the COP meeting begins. I think, you have an opportunity now by virtue of the fact that you've had these 3 summits, you have the findings of the 3 conversations. I think you can find the points of synergy amongst those. And I would say, for all of the countries that are represented in this room, I would say you should reach out to the presidents or to those delegations right now. I mean, I think because whatever the process is, if it begins with the presidents and the prime ministers or whoever, you want them to be articulating the issues and the points that are important to you right from the very beginning. Because if you wait until the end, those points will be lost. It'll be too late in the process. So I think the time is now, to make your voices heard. I don't think you should be apologetic. I don't think you should sit in the background. I don't think you should pretend as if your realities are not your realities. Your realities are, in fact, your realities. And I think you should be aware of the fact that other countries, people in other countries are going to do exactly the same thing. They're going to press their points. So I think you've got to get your political leaders in line. I think you've got to take advantage of the opportunities, make sure they're very clear about what it is that you believe in, what you want, what you're going to be listening for. And if they don't offer that articulation, to let them know that you're going to be in touch with them, to let them know you didn't hear it.
Thank you, Reverend.
I just want to... There was also a question which was not answered from our friend with the Tanzanian t-shirt, but Kenyan. Yeah, he said about religious leaders used to teach and preach. There is a German saying which says, I did my PhD in German. When good people do nothing, evil increases. When good people do nothing, increases. Religious leaders have a role to play. The power of example, the power of forward moving. And after the sin of Adam and Eve, everybody was infected and affected. And religious leaders don't simply fall from the skies. They are also, in Latin, ex hominibus pro hominibus. From people for the people. Ex hominibus pro hominibus. That they don't come from angels. They come from people, but they should know their roles. This is just because I want to be fair to you, otherwise I think we will not be very happy. My $1 billion question, my $1 billion question is to everybody. Do you think that Paris and the negotiators, the so-called negotiators, they are negotiating for your life, and the presidents and all these big people and the G7 and all these have solutions to this problem? They don't have. I know I must come forward, really. I know there are some people who just want to go to for shopping. Now, my $1 billion question is, are these people, the African Union, have they formulated what they are going to talk there? Not yet. Doing these things, they go there and they are being told, okay, the francophone, the anglophone, everybody has his own or her own whatever. Do we have also a right to see what they are going to present there before they go there? The East African Community, ECOWAS, South Africa, do we have also the right to see what they are going to present there? Do we have the right? We have the right, so we should also be engaged. The last methodological thing, as environmental professor, I say, read here, act on what? Act on what? Now, for me, A stands for analysis. A biological analysis, chemical analysis, a social analysis, a farm-oriented analysis, a media, whatever analysis, a theological, spiritual analysis, a diplomatic analysis, the quantitative and the qualitative analysis. C stands for convince. So, scientific conviction, media conviction, religious conviction. T stands for transformation. Again, transform your people in biology and chemistry. I should transform my people in spirituality. You should transform your people in CDOs, etc. Or observe scientifically, spiritually, economically, etc. I want to finish.
Okay.
I have the passion.
Thank you, Reverend. The Reverend wants to make a point.
No, I have to finish. Yes. Okay.
So I want to say that I think it's not correct to say that the AU doesn't have a position. I think they do have a position. What I think is important is that now that you're formulating your position, you need to let them know what your position is. That I think is a critical factor. But I don't think you should assume that they don't have a position, because if they don't have a position by now, then they don't even have. They shouldn't even show up. But let me say, also, to add to what you were saying about the clergy, I think you're absolutely right. The clergy are, the clergy are only empowered as a religious voice if their members stand behind them as clergy. That, from the perspective of politicians, they believe that clergy represent the grassroots. But that point is only proven when the members support the clergy. So, if the religious leaders are going to make their voices heard, I hope, I pray, that the members of those congregations will add their voices to those of the clergy, because that's what will create a sense of power and authenticity to that voice. And that's a big challenge, it's a real need. But I think politicians, if they hear the congregation supporting the clergy, then they will in fact pay attention to that voice.
Thank you.
I have to go and catch a plane back to New York.
Yes.
So thank you for allowing me to be a part of your wonderful summit. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Reverend. Reverend, I would like to just take in 2 more questions. We have about 3 minutes left. And this Reverend is leaving us.
Just 1 minute, 1 point. If the African Union has a stand, well and good, we have to have knowledge about it. I agree with him 800%, but again, I want to have that. It's not a dogma. It has to be unveiled so that people can see what is going to be negotiated for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reverend.
My name is Stephen Mashua. I'm the newly elected president for an organization known as African Youth Union. It's a civil society organization that brings together young people from all over the continent, and it's headquartered in South Africa. For the parliamentarians, unfortunately, I think the guy has left, but there was a position whereby they were saying that 1.5% of the GDP of developed nations will be dedicated contributed towards climate change mitigation. My concern was, would this be compromising the negotiation because the developed nations can even offer more to continue with the climate change aspects? Then the other one was, are we not seeing a situation whereby African nations will be contributors of climate change with the current unexploited natural resources which are being discovered in various nations? We saw the discovery of oil deposits in Kenya and other countries. Then the other concern was, it's more
Could I ask you to be quick because we are reaching the buffer end?
Okay.
So I have 2 questions.
Okay. The other one is a solution on which the French presidency requested for. I think eco-based adaptation approach, as far as agriculture is concerned, could be a solution to climate change in Africa, bearing in mind that 65% of the world's arable land is found here in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the gentleman in the blue who's coming downstairs.
I have to make an effort, and my pleas to everybody, every one of us, that maybe it's high time we also set a date, because we have become good conference attenders so far, and we also have to realize that we're also contributing in polluting and destroying our environment. So my plea to all of us is for us to now make a deadline. If these things, if these discussions, if these engagements, which bring a lot of people, which contribute to a lot of carbon emissions, which cost a lot, are actually much more expensive and are at all not bringing any practical change to us, maybe we should also set a deadline. That by this time enough should be enough, and we should concentrate those resources in supporting initiatives which actually bring change in the grounds that we come from. And 10,000 tickets from here to Paris will bring a lot of change in a village where I come from. Thank you.
Normally, we knew that trying to achieve altogether the objective of staying below 2 degrees Celsius would be at least a progress. And as I mentioned to you, with the contribution INDC has published recently, we would reach 3. But at the trend, as we have at the moment, is that we are between 4 and 6 degrees Celsius as increase of. So everything we would go do in order to maintain under 2 degrees Celsius, or even to 1 plus 1.5, if something that has been had to be the main objective, not only at the end of this month or at the mid of December, but it's something that we have to maintain until the end of this century. It's not the same. It's not. We have to decrease as much as we can with the solution and the decision will be taken. But the other thing is that if necessary, we need to be prepared to strengthen our agreement and the decision we will take in December in order more and more to develop, because we need not only to decrease the temperature, we need everybody to become less poor. I didn't want to strengthen too much about this adoption of in New York on these SDGs. But what was amazing in 2015 is that now there is a goal saying that we want 0 carbon and 0 poverty. So we need to go in that direction. And 1.5, if possible, yes. If not, we have to do that regularly every year.
Thank you. And Mohamisi, the other comment was about are African countries not going to become part of the problem by polluting so much?
Yes, we knew that Africa contributed little, less than 5% to the global emission right now, but also we are paying the highest. And the message that we've been seeing, and I think that's also comes out strongly, is Africa cannot also afford to go to the same development pathway that has put the world where we are now. So as much as we have a right for development, but also we need to be sensitive and we need to commit all of us to the development path, because I think unlike Europe and US, Africa has an opportunity to learn and pick what has worked and what is not working. And I think it's an opportunity to jump the native energy and economy to go to the green economy. For example, we are speaking of Africa, which is less than 10% of the people have access to electricity. So we don't have to go now to use coal as a source of energy, but we can go directly to renewable energy, for example, solar power and wind power. So in a way, we are providing power to our people, but we go directly to the green energy rather than go back to the same development path. So to Africa, it has to be about the changing and using the different development model than the one that has been used to solve the same problem.
Okay, thank you, Mwanamisi. Now, Professor, I'm going to come to you for a brief word just to wind things up from your point of view, and then I will go to Mama Victoria.
When you are going for negotiation, you don't go with empty hand. You have to have some figures. For instance, Kenya is asking $40 billion a decade for the next 3 decades. That is what we are saying. We are also offering to reduce greenhouse gases by 30% during the next 30 years. That is our package which we are going to negotiate. So by the parliamentarian says we want 1.5 billion% of the developed countries. I don't know how much it will be, but you can see how much Kenya wants of that 1.5. Possibly take all of it. So these are the negotiating points.
Thank you, Professor. And now, Victoria, please give us your last reflections on this.
Ladies and gentlemen, those who are going to parish, you are going on behalf of others. And you have to go with the same voice, and you know the people you are representing. Whether you succeed or not, please come back and report to us, so that at the grassroots we see what we can do, what technology we are going to use as small-scale farmers. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are very over time. I know. I really appreciate those of you who stayed so long. It just remains for me to thank very much all of the people who've been organizing all of these events, particularly PACCHA, the Pan-Africa Climate Justice Alliance, particularly the We Have Faith Coalition, particularly Christian Aid and ACT Alliance, particularly TroCare. And I also want to thank the University of Nairobi for hosting us this afternoon. It has been a very illuminating discussion. And I should also thank Oxfam. I forgot Oxfam because I work for Oxfam. But also thanks to us. So thank you very much, everybody. I'm apologizing to you for not having enough time for the real full debate, but I'm sure we can keep this conversation going. Keep it going on social media, keep it going on Facebook, keep it going in your communities, and keep pushing that agenda upwards. So it just remains for me to thank you all for spending your time with us this afternoon, and safe journey home.
Lest we forget, climate change is about the local farmer who can't understand why the rains are so unpredictable, the fisherman who can't understand why the river is drying up, the birds that are nesting, breeding and migrating earlier as seasons arrive sooner than before, and our children who maybe will read about polar bears just like we read about dinosaurs.